Hello, and welcome to Coffee with Jesus. I am your host, Todd Jubilee.
And I'm your co host, Sarah Van Triel.
Welcome to the first episode of what is now our fifth season. What I would like to do in this episode is I'd like to start by reading a passage of scripture. I should probably do that in a lot more episodes, but this one really speaks to the heart of what we're going to talk about today. So I'd like to start by reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 through 7. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. For just as the sufferings of Christ flow over into our lives, so also, through Christ, our comfort overflows. If we are distressed, it is for your comfort and salvation. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which produces in you patient endurance of the same sufferings we suffer. And our hope for you is firm, because we know that just as you share in our sufferings, so also you share in our comfort. And I love this passage, and I get a different thing out of it every time. But I think that this really speaks to the heart of what, Coffee with Jesus is. And I know I titled this episode with a question, and in a lot of podcasts and a lot of YouTube videos, they'll put a question in the title and they'll kind of string you along, through the episode. I'm just going to give you a spoiler right up front. How are we comforted? How do we get our comfort? Where does it come from? It comes from God, you know, and it's just amazing that no matter what we're going through, we have that source of comfort. And what's more, when we know people who are going through difficult times, we can take that comfort that we've received and pass that along to others as well.
Totally agree, Todd. So many thoughts on this, but let me start with one, which is sometimes people ask, how do you know that comfort comes, from God? Like, how do you, and then maybe how do you access it? Um, and so, as you and I've been talking about doing this particular episode and start of season 5 episode for quite some time. So, I was given thoughts to like, I've been a Christian my whole life and known that, but like, when was one of those really early times that I like truly felt what I'd call comfort and knew it came directly from God? And I was reflecting back on um, time. I'm not sure if I've shared this story in any podcast before, but when I was in early high school, I did a summer camp that was away for the summer, and got to know all kinds of new people, and it was like world opening for me to be there. And the last night was like the you can stay up all night and hang out, well. And as you and I were just talking about prior to the episode, when I don't get sleep, I'm a bit of a mess. So the next day was like leaving all these new friends and this like fantastic experience and having no sleep. So you might imagine I was a bit of an emotional wreck that day, lots of tears. And then my family who was picking me up had errands they wanted to run on the way home. And I was like, I can't run errands. I'm in no state to do this. So I finally convinced my parents to let me go to the car. And I just said a very brief prayer for God to take this away, like this like distress feeling away. The next thing I knew, my parents got back in the car, which was locked. Unlocked the car, got back in, and I had slept for an hour. I was out solid for an hour, and I woke up feeling completely different than when I went to sleep. Right. And so funny enough, like one of my very first experiences was like it's surrender, and then because we talk about how when you go to sleep you have to surrender, right? So there was a surrender, but I come back to that moment a lot in knowing that that just asking the simple, not having the answers, asking the simple, getting the comfort of just a little bit of sleep, like changed, gave me the comfort I needed to then move on to what was next.
Oh yeah, and I love how you talked about surrender, because it's hard to do, especially when things aren't going well. And I mean, the last part of the fourth season was pretty much real time, the struggles that I was going through. And one of the hardest things I had to learn was to surrender everything to God, circumstances, even in some cases, solutions. Um, you know, my dad, he was suffering for a long time before he finally passed. And I was like, God, why are you even letting him suffer? What, you know, and I was like, what can I do? And I realized that there was really nothing I could do. And I eventually just had to surrender to God and be like, okay, God, I'm surrendering the circumstances, I'm surrendering my emotions, my grief. I'm just going to give it all to you, and just, your will be done. But please, you know, look out for my family and look out for my father. And it was hard because especially when you see someone suffering, you want to jump in and you want to do something. Um, and in this particular case, surrender was the way to go. you know and likewise with my housing situation, I was like, okay, I got to make these plans, and I got to look at houses at this date, and I got to do this, and I got to do this, and I got everything lined up. And then I was like, all right, God, I'm going to surrender to you. And we wound up not having to move at all. um so I love how you talk about surrender, because it is important, and there is a lot of comfort in that surrender as well, whether it's surrendering to sleep so you can be well rested, or just surrendering to God and letting him take care of that, because he will not just provide you the comfort in your storm. He'll actually help you with what you need to get through it.
100%. I think that it also kind of strikes me that in order to surrender, there has to be, well, maybe it doesn't have to be, but in this case, when there is a little bit of trust on the other side, it becomes a little easier to surrender to. So that when I talk about coming back to that moment of like having an answered prayer in a way that I just wasn't expecting, and then delving deep and getting deep into faith and spirituality and developing that trust makes it easier to have the into the understanding the core beliefs of like what is it that I know to be true, right? Then it becomes easier to do what you just said, to say, okay, like tried to manage this, I've tried to manage this, I've tried to manage this, but I'm realizing I'm not the one in control here. So let me surrender that moment. And but also I think for me, like understanding that it's not um, as a psychologist, we know that you will have all the emotions in the books over time, which you just particularly brought up on grief. I think it's one of the hardest for us to wrap our heads around, and for us to experience, to be in. But also knowing that we grow from all of those things, right? We're not fully human if we don't have them all. We could go back to Jesus's life, right? That was part of it, is that it was not all sunshine and roses, right? In fact, much of it was not. It we have to go through some of those hard emotions in order to be able to grow. So trusting that that's part of how we're going to go. It's part of God's plan for us. I've shared in recent episodes how we moved. We had all these plans. It didn't work. We moved back. Like there was so much there to have to trust that the ultimate plan, would be okay. And I think, to come to this place of being able to surrender, and having enough trust to surrender, where you truly receive that comfort, it's in part just opening yourself up to the presence of God, and then letting him be there in the moment, right? And this is going to be totally wild, but hang in with me just for a second. I had this realization the other day, just yesterday, actually. So Evie just competed in a big horse competition, and we got a shirt from the place for her, or whatever. So it's like, brand new shirt, the newest shirt, and special because it comes from this place. I realize that sometimes when I get those, like I will hold on to them and wait for the perfect moment to wear this shirt, like because it's new and it's my favorite, and it's my best, and I did this as a kid, as well, right? Um, but funny enough, the moment I took it out of the wash and I put it in her room, she had it on that same day. right? And then she wore it to ride her horse that evening, which is like her new best shirt, you know? But it struck me from the idea that we don't need to just like draw down that relationship, that trust, that surrender only in certain moments. Sometimes we feel those moments the strongest, or we need those moments. But when we open that up to wear that favorite shirt every day, when we open up to be in that presence every day and in the moments, that's when that comfort and that trust flows. So it's kind of back to, I told you I'm all over the place a little bit here, but the idea that God is omnipresent, He's with us all the time, right? And if when we're open to that, either for ourselves in need of comfort, or for saying prayers for others in need of comfort, or whatever we're in at the moment, that if we'll just put on that relationship with God, if we'll put on that shirt that we're holding out, for this moment, we might really need it. Like, can actually handle being worn every day, right? And all day.
Yeah, and it's funny because the other day one of my Facebook memories was it was one of the pages I had shared from my devotional book, and it was about using God or Jesus as a crutch, and the thing that I basically talked about was, how sometimes Christians are disparaged for using God as a crutch. And I put in there basically I said, well, yeah, so so what? So what if we use God for a crutch, Because there have been times where I literally couldn't do it on my own. We've done episodes together where I've admitted there sometimes the only thing I can pray is God help. And there's nothing wrong with that because God knows. And part of him, being omnipresent, he's there, he's everywhere. He knows what you're going through. He knows what you need, you know. And you know what? It's okay to use God as a crutch when you can't do it on your own. What are crutches for? If you break a leg, you can't walk on your own. You use those crutches until you're healed up and you can walk on your own, right? There have been times where I I couldn't even pray to ask God for the help that I needed. Literally, all I could do was say, God, help. And I was very much using God as a crutch. And you know what? God supported me. God supported me until He brought me through that situation where I could walk on my own, you know? And so, yeah, I agree very much with what you said. And again, sometimes we tell things in a convoluted way, but I think it's just important to show, no matter what kind of metaphor we use, that God is there for us, and it's okay to rely on Him, and it's okay if you are so downtrodden that you can't even form the words to ask for the help that you need in your situation, because God is there, and God is your comfort, and God will take you through that. And then, you know, down the line, you may find yourself in a situation where one of your friends or one of your family members is going through something difficult, and you can have that confidence that they'll get through it, and you can share that comfort and that confidence with them because you use God as a crutch. And so yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing that no matter what you're going through, God is with you because, like you said, God is he's omniscient and he's omnipresent, and he knows exactly what we need and when we need it.
100% agree. And I think that's it's changed the way that I pray as well. Kind of knowing and trusting in God's will and God's omniscience and omnipresence, right? I was just thinking about that when you talk about. I mean, it's one thing for ourselves to be in the moment and trust that and go to that and ask for that, right? In whatever way, whether it's God help, whether it's Thy will be done, whether it's whatever that prayer is, right? But it's also hard when you have somebody close to you that, or not close to you, but stories that strike you, right? That really hit deep emotions of folks that need comfort, right? And um, so I think though that so often, like, the trust that God knows better what that person needs than even we do. So in those moments, saying the prayer of like, God, just help this person, whoever it is, know that you're with them. Like this was a prayer I prayed a few weeks ago. Um, Entering a new situation. Wasn't sure exactly what this person needed. but knew that there was anxiety and all of this. So I was like, yeah, my prayer was simply like, help her know that you're with her, help her feel your presence, help her, pull whatever that is internally that she needs for whatever this is happening. And loss of family members. I mean, you just lost your dad. I've known so many folks lose people, recently, and everybody has experiences grief a little bit differently, right? So the prayer and the words just for God to be with that person, extra arms around that person, in the moments, and in whatever way that's really helpful, for the person in need. And the world situations, there's so many stories that strike us on things that are happening. And to I know there's a lot of call, not just for prayers but for action. So I'm not calling for just prayers, where there's action needed, where there's folks that can do advocacy, where there's folks that can actually lend help, and not in any way um, saying, because I fully believe in that as well. But I think there is a certain like turn to God to for this, like, help with what that is. Because when we act without, trying to touch base with that, we don't always know what's best. So there's something that comes in with trusting, with that connecting. I talked in the very first episode we ever connected together about that really deep knowing, and being able to connect with what I've, come to know. This deep knowing, I think, is Holy Spirit right within. But when you can connect with that deep knowing, trust that deep knowing, listen for that, and pray for that. That then, really does kind of lead to whatever's next, which doesn't always mean the outcome we're looking for, right? It doesn't always mean that the person with anxiety ended up doing well with whatever happened, or, that the person who's lost somebody, gains enlightenment about how grief is actually love, or that, the world catastrophes that happen, have a miracle and stop. But it does help with kind of that next right thing, I think, um, and in the trust, and in the gaining comfort, and the hope. Maybe that's the next word I'm looking for. Is that the comfort is the hope that things um, will get better, in those really hard times too.
Yeah, and that's again something that we can provide to those, around us, to our friends and to our family, is that hope that things will get better. You know, when I was working at the VA, I had a friend who was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was really really scared. And by that point, and I've shared this before, but I had been jobless, homeless, bankrupt, had all my worldly goods washed out to sea, had a heart attack, had skin cancer, and God brought me through all of it. And so I could tell her with confidence that God would bring her through it. And I could share what God had brought me through. And I was able to give her that hope. And I mean, that hope went a long way for her. And she did get through it. And I think it's very important that, we can look back on the situations that God has gotten us through, and then use that to provide not just that comfort, but like you said, that hope, to people so that they can. It's difficult when you're going through a storm to see the sunlight on the other side, you know. Um, and having been in a lot of storms this year so far, I can attest that it's difficult. Even knowing God has gotten me through all these other storms, and I could know that God was going to get me through the current storms, but it was still difficult to see that sunlight on the other side. And so when our friends, our family are going through their own storms, we can use the confidence and the comfort and the hope that we gained, and we can share that with them, and help them to get through their own storms.
100% agree with that, Todd. And just thinking that we do better with that when we put on our proverbial God presence T-shirt that's been my, like, not well articulated yet, but like aha of the week. Like when I put on t-shirt that I love so much, when I put on that relationship that I really know, trust, allow myself to be open to the presence of that, then I'm so much better for myself and I'm so much better for others. Because when we, when I don't have that on, it's easy to get caught up in the frustration, in the anxiety, in the grief, and the sadness with others, right? And empathy is a fantastic thing, but also good to keep a calmness about that. I think when you're the supporting, in that supporting role. So, and it's, our summer has been just like wild all over the place. We had so many things, happening this summer, to try just to keep up. And I'll just admit there were days I didn't put on that comfort, t-shirt, that relationship, as much as I should. And you can tell the days when it's on and the days when I left it in the dirty laundry. I don't know. That it's just, like, I will find myself much more stressed when I'm not in that kind of grounded, solid. And when I'm stressed, when mama's stressed around this house, nobody enjoys it, right? Like, and everybody else is dysregulated. So finding that regulation, which another huge thing for me, like just grounding in that faith and that knowing and that knowledge and that presence every day, allows me to be regulated in a way, to be much better to those around me.
Awesome. And you're absolutely right, you know. Um, yeah, I mean, you're right. The way we are does impact those around us, you know. And so it's important, I think, just to note that, we need that comfort sometimes just so we can hold things together for those around us. And so sometimes, just for our own peace of mind, we just need to give it up to God. And like you said in the very beginning, it's about surrender, you know. There's sometimes there is very little we can do, so we have no choice but to surrender. And sometimes we feel like we just need to do so much, and that's probably when it's hardest. But we still need to surrender, you know. And then when God does get us through, we can go ahead and use that hope, that comfort and strength that we have received from God, and provide that to others.
100%. Few, or as you were talking, there was like one final thought for me, which was just, in this world, this, that, like, come back to all these core beliefs all the time, right? But like, God created each of us individually and uniquely. And I was just having a conversation with my dad last night, who was, talking about somebody who asked him how he really knows that God's present. And he talked about an example of the trees, and he talked about the fact that every single human has a very unique, fingerprint, right? No two fingerprints are exactly the same. Like, we're each developed uniquely. Um, and when we can lean into that, like, we were all built to be part of this community, together. So what you bring to the table for comfort from others might be slightly different from what I bring to the table for comfort for others, but it all works together, in this greater plan. As we go into the rest of season 5, we hear from lots of different, hosts and guests on the podcast, all of which are going to bring different perspectives, for consideration, for thought, for what this means for them. So just, an appreciation of that uniqueness that we were created to be, with this underlying, knowledge that we all can work together, be together, to get through the hard times, to have hope for what's happening next, and to lean on God and each other,
Mhm.
in doing that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Different people get different things from their own tribulations, and like you said, they bring different things to the table. And so, at least for the first part of season 5, we're going to see a lot of different people sharing how they have received comfort from God, and then they'll be using that to in their episodes to talk about it and to help other people. So you're absolutely right. It's, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and different people get different things to share, and so it's very important to have a community. And we'll get into a little more detail about community in another episode. But absolutely, it's very very important. So Sarah, thank you for taking the time to join me on our season opener as it is. Um, and for those of you who are listening, for watching, thank you very much. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And may God bless each and every one of you.